Hey y'all, Nolo here. Today we're having a look at Paradox's latest release, Europa Universalis 5. This game is just so freaking beautiful and full of depth. I've played countless strategy games, many from this same studio. The Crusader Kings title, Stellaris, even Europa's previous entry EU4. But with this release, they just really cooked. The level of detail in this world and how the systems interact is just so incredible, and thanks to the devs, it's not impossible to dive into. I'll get more into that later, but just know before we start, this isn't a full review, not even close. These EU games take dozens of hours to complete, and I have a full-time job, so I'll feel way more qualified to give a full review once I get a few more campaigns under my belt. Without further delay, here's why Europa Universalis 5 is goated. EU5 is in many ways the natural successor to EU4, but it doesn't just feel like the same game with a new coat of paint slapped on it. This game genuinely rethinks many of its core features and improves on most of them. Starting with the start year, 1337. In the eye of pop culture, this is like after the Dark Ages, the Western Roman Empire just fell 1,000 years ago, and the Eastern Roman Empire has like 1 HP left, they on the brink of death. The most notable event from this time is the start of the 100 Years' War, that infamous struggle between England and France. As a start date, I think is a refreshing change of pace, because we get a couple centuries in those late Middle Ages, a time when standing armies were not standard. You'll be fighting early wars with drafted peasants with pitchforks. You'll see that progression from squabbling lords with like a few peasants to the Renaissance period and the modern eras of the world, and you get to see that whole progression, and you get to form a nation out of that world. At the game start 1337, the idea of a nationality and a country are still in its infant stages. There aren't really Italians, Germans, French as a nation, they're like blobs, fuzzy around the edges. And this game models that in a pretty engaging way. EU4, on the other hand, had provinces each have a monoculture. It treated populations and people as distinct blobs, each having the same religion, culture, and language. These blobs also had culture groups that were also rigid. In contrast, this game has a simulation not only more detailed, but it simulates even the minority cultures in each province of the world. And cultures can have multiple groups identified with them. So what that does, it leads to a more natural alliance system between the cultures. Yes, in theory, you could have one French guy hiding in your empire, and his happiness and his wants and needs will matter to your game, even if it's 0.0001% effect. And did I say province? No, EU5 actually breaks the old provinces down into smaller locations, leading to a more granular map, cleaner borders, or it could also lead to this.
No! God, please, no! No!
A big change for the better in this title is how accessible it is to new players, without it being dumbed down at the expense of the hardcore crowd. Hear me out. This game is complicated, don't get me wrong. There's supply chains, economy, trade, diplomacy, exploration, colonies. It's enough to make you go crazy if you go into the details of everything all at once. But thankfully, you don't have to tackle everything at once. The devs, in their grace and wisdom, have added automation to these systems, I think for the first time in this series. Let me tell you, this has helped me a lot when first starting out the game. You automate the things that you don't feel ready to tackle yet, or that you can't bother to deal with. And you learn what interests you about the game first. Don't worry, the rest of the game is not going anywhere. If you're anything like me, you'll eventually want to turn off the autopilot in some of these systems, just to see how you could tinker with them, how you can make it better or worse than what the AI was doing. The beauty of this system is that it kind of is like being a king in those time periods. You would delegate whatever the hell you didn't want to bother with, and then you focus on fabricating a false reason to invade your neighboring kingdoms, For a series that historically struggled with player accessibility, these automations are a major achievement. I really love how true to life these systems are when it comes to royal power. Yes, you're the king, you're the emperor, the chieftain of your kingdom, right? But no man can rule alone. In EU5, you have different estates that form your country, be it the religious clergy, the wealthy nobles and aristocrats that actually control your lands, or the middle class artisans and merchants. All these levels of society are in constant tug of war for power and for money. So you have to be careful what privileges you grant to these people. You might start the game with a bunch of privileges that you never had anything to do with, and you just have to deal with the nobles being way more powerful than your crown power is. Why do you have to be careful with granting privileges? Because taking something away is way more costly than granting it. And if a state is already unhappy, you could find yourself in a civil war very quickly. So after a couple of playthroughs, here's where I stand. In a year full of lackluster titles and mediocre launches, I'm looking at EU5 7. I can gladly say that my time spent with EU5 feels refreshing. This title is shaping up to be one of my favorites of 2025, and it's definitely living up to the hype I had for it. Before I recommend this game to you, I want you to be familiar with how this company sells its games. Paradox will drop its main release, like EU5, and then over the years they'll sprinkle out DLC with more detailed areas, new mechanics and such. Just know that unless you're made of money, you're probably not going to buy all these expansions. I'm not going to buy all these expansions. They add up really quick. But do know that for a vanilla game with no expansions, EU5 feels like a complete product. The devs have been keeping active patching, bug fixes like crazy, and balance fixes. That's great to see, that they're keeping hands-on approach, not just abandoning it until they can make more money. Now I'll leave you to watch my Castile run, where I got too greedy and I absorbed Navarro and Portugal way too quickly, and I ended up being kicked out of the Catholic Church, and half of Europe just came and steamrolled my shit. So until the next one, Nolo out.